Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial. And in this one we're going to be producing what you see in front of you on the screen, which is of course water drops running down a soda can. Now, a few weeks ago I was asked if I could get involved with doing something like this by Jaime Ferreira, and I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. If I haven't, sincere apologies, but the shout out goes out to you for the idea for this one. And what we're going to be using to produce this is a combination of thinking particles, which is a bit of a departure for me because I've never used thinking particles before, but we're going to be building an Expresso rig to create those. And we're also going to be using volumes. So a couple of things that we've not really touched upon before. But anyway, that's what we're going to be about in this tutorial. So without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. We'll start by bringing in a cylinder, and the radius will just make 60. The height can stay at 200. We can leave everything else actually the way it is. We'll also move it 100 in the Y, so we'll set it so that it's at floor level, because we can of course add a floor a little bit later if we wish to. In our caps tab here, we'll say that we do want 2 segments. We will fillet it and we'll say 3 segments and 10 centimeters for the radius. And that gives us a basic idea for what our can will look like. We just switch the display to garage shading lines and we'll leave it, I think, as it is. We can use isopalms actually. Oh no, I think we will leave it at wireframe because we see the cap segments better that way. Okay, fantastic. Let's make this editable. So I'll hit C. And then we can think about what we're going to be doing with the caps. Now, if we select our edge mode, UL for loop selection, we can select this and then we'll do a little bit of work. We'll just switch off the Y-axis here and scale along the X and Z. Scale to about there, and then I'll just drop this down in the Y so that it's somewhere there. It just gives us a basic idea. I'm not going to go too detailed with this. If you wish to go further with the detail, please do, but I'm only going to go that far. Underneath, the same sort of thing applies really. UL, all you've got to do with this, and again, you don't need to add this detail if you don't want to, but it's just an idea. So we'll just bring that one up, go to points mode, select the center point, and just move that one up. Just switch to right hand view, zoom in a little bit so that we can see what we're doing, and we can just see where this is, and we just put that up there so that it gives you that curvature underneath the thing if that's what you need. So that'll do. I don't think I'm going to go any further with the detail on this. I think that's fine. So that's our can. We'll rename it can and we'll leave it at that, and then we can move on from here and think about where we're going next. The next port of call for us is actually to set a selection. So I'm going to switch back to polygon mode here and then UL once again and select a few loops around this thing. Those two, all of these, and probably just this one here. That will do, I think, for the selection. And this is where we want the droplets to actually be placed upon the can. I don't want them on the top and I don't want them underneath, obviously. So we'll go to our select menu here and store selection, and we've got a polygon selection there ready to go. I won't change the name, there's no real need to. So that's great. That's our next step done. Moving on from here, we can think about setting up some dynamics for our can. In our tags menu, we'll bring in a collider body. The dynamics tab here, we don't have to change anything. We can leave that as it is. In our collision, the inherit tag, we can say none. Individual elements, we can switch to off. The shape, we'll select automatic. And then the only things we need to change are the bounce and friction. We don't want these at 100%. If you leave them there, you'll find the thinking particles just won't work properly. That's what I found. And at first, I thought there was a problem with the software and actually asked Maxon for some help. But they said that's basically that was what it was. There was the issue was with the dynamics. So let's just set that up at 50% and 30%. Okay, so that's fine. We're ready to go from here. Once again, I'll reach for my tags menu and in our programming tags, select Expresso. And we'll just do this on the can. There's no need to use a specific null for the Expresso on this occasion. Okay, ready to go. So what we can do is bring in a time node first. That's the first node that we need to reach for. And as I so often do, I'll delete the time port and add a frame port. The next node I require will be a compare. So we'll bring the compare in and we'll plumb the output from the time node into the input one of the compare. Our function here, we don't need equal to 0, we actually need less than or equal to 0. And that's what we need to do there. Moving on from here, the next node we need will be the first of our thinking particles nodes, and that will be a generator, and it will be P matter waves. So we'll bring one of those in, and at the input stage we'll give it an on port. And we can plumb the output of the compare into the on. So when we're less than or equal to 0, we want to switch this on. We want some particle birth at that time. Moving on from here, we need to set this up. Okay, so let's just bring that back to 100% and make it so that we can see it. Okay, great. So what do we need in here? Well, we need our can, so we can drag and drop that into the object field. And we can also bring in our selection and drop it here. Let's have a look where we need to go next. Now, our birth type, we need to be shot. And I'm going to say 1000 initially. We can easily change that if we need to. Birth type we can just leave as constant, that's fine. Life, we can say, we can leave it at 90 frames. We can go further than that if we wish to. I mean, the chances are, and what I'll do actually is make 500 frames down there, and then in the life here, I'll just say 500 so that we keep it for the whole animation. Our speed needs to be 0. Everything else I think we can leave as it is. So that's fine. That's the setup that we need to do. Okay. Don't worry about the UVW type and lights and things like that. Don't worry about any of that. It's not important. Okay, that's fine. So we've got that set up and it's ready to go. The next node we'll bring in will be a p-pass node, once again from our thinking particles. So p-pass, we'll bring one of those in. The all in there relates to the fact that we're going to be using all the particles from the particle or p matter waves node here. So any particles that are birthed here, that are born here, they're going to be passed by this node. Okay. If you look at the parameter down here, we can see we've got group here. That's if we're using groups. Well, we're not. You know, you might have multiple p-pass nodes, group 1, group 2, group 3, etc. So we're not doing that. We just need to use all the particles that are birthed. So that's the first thing. The next thing is to bring in a couple of nulls. So we'll do that. We'll name this one gravity. And this one we'll name wind. And you'll see why very shortly. Moving on from here then, we need two more nulls, two more nodes. So we'll bring in, from our dynamics here, P gravity, and once again from our dynamics, P wind. So we've got those two in and we can connect them up to our P pass. So we'll just do that now. And they're nicely set up and ready for the next step. Now if we start with the gravity, we can see that we've got in our parameters an object field here. So we'll grab a hold of this null and bring it in there. And straight away we can see that we've got an icon here with an arrow, which is currently pointing along the z-axis. We need it to point downwards in the y. So what we'll do is select this and say -90 in the rotation P. And now we can see that we're pointing in the correct direction. I'll select the node again and we can start looking at the rest of the parameters. We do need a planar type. There's the spherical type. We don't need that. We'll leave it planar. The strength we can make 4. It doesn't want to be too strong. We'll give it a decay of 10 and we'll say mass dependence 1%, and that's as much as we're going to say in there. Moving on from here, we can start thinking about the wind. Once again, we can drag the wind object into here and straight away we get another icon. As I did with the gravity, I'm going to make the wind face in the same direction. So I'm going to say -90 there. Okay, that's fine. In fact, what we'll do, we can make both of these disappear for now, so they're just not distracting us. Select our node again, and what we can look at here is what we're going to do. Now, the strength, again, planar type, we'll leave that. We don't want spherical. Leave it as a planar type. Strength 100, that's fine. Decay we'll leave as it is. Mass dependence and size dependence we'll leave as they are. Turbulence I'll make 5. Frequency 5. And structure size I'm going to make 0. So that's all I'm going to do in there. And those two are set up and ready to go. The next node I'm going to need will be a particle mass. So we'll come down to thinking particles, standard, P mass. Bring one of those in. And we can think about what we're doing here. Now, the particle mass, we'll leave that as 1. But the variation will make, we can make it whatever you like, really. It just gives it a little bit of variance. If we make it, say 50%, let's go 50%. We can easily change that and play around with it and do whatever we like. And then all we've got to do is connect the P pass to the particle input of the P mass. And those three are all set up and ready to go. Right, moving on from here then, let's make the window a little bigger and we'll think about some more nodes. The next thinking particles node that we need is going to be a get data node, and that will be from our helper menu here. So get data. We can plumb the output of the P-pass into the particle input of the get data node, and at the output stage we want position. That's the data that we're interested in getting. So we want our particles position. Moving on from here, we need a dynamics node. Now let's get one of those. So come down to bullet and we need a dynamics proximity. Bring that in and we can connect the position output from the get data to the point input of the dynamics proximity. Now there's a couple of fields that we need to do something, well, a field certainly that we need something to do something with. So we need to bring our can into the object field, because that's the object that we're interested in sticking our particles to, basically. And in our mode here, we don't need center, we actually need shape, because we want our particles to adhere to the can and follow its shape, so that makes sense. So that's set up and ready to go. Moving on from here, we need a set data node. So we've got to come down to our thinking particles again, and this is actually in our standard menu. It's not in the helper menu, which is a bit confusing, but there you go, it's just the way it works. Just make this window a little bigger again. We need to add a couple more ports. We need an on port and we also need a position port. So we've got those two in, and we'll just bring the on to the top. You'll see what we're going to use that for a little bit later. The particle port, we can plumb the output of our P-pass node into there. So that's taking care of that. And then the output from our position port of the dynamics proximity here, we can plumb that into the position. Okay, great. So moving on from here, we need to bring in firstly another compare node. So we'll select and bring one of those in. And the function for this needs to be greater than 0. And we can plug the output of our frame port into the input 1 of the compare. So when we're greater than 0, we basically want to switch on the pset data. We'll want to be using that, but also we want to switch the dynamics proximity on. Well, we've got no way of enabling that from within this node, so what we need to do is grab a hold of this, the operator here, drag that in, and then we do have in the basic properties we've got enabled, so we can use that to switch that on. So we'll plumb the output of that into there. Straight away we can see that it's switched off. It's got a yellow border, and we'll plumb this in here. And interestingly, we don't get a yellow border on there, but that's the way it works. Okay, so we've got that there. We'll just move things around a little bit so that we can see all of our connections. And that is our expression. That's as much as we need to do with the Expresso. So let's see if anything happens. So we'll just go forward a few frames, then go back. Now straight away we can see that we do have our particles. We've got them covering our can. Let's see if we look downwards, we can see that we don't have any on the top or the bottom, which is exactly what we wanted to happen. So the selection's working okay. Let's see what happens when we play the timeline. Straight away we can see our particles are falling and they are adhering to our can. They're a little bit fast though, so there's obviously some issues that we've got there. Now let's just take a look and see what we've got within our expression. Let's just check the gravity. Yeah, no, that strength is, yep, I would say that everything's okay, I think, in there. Let's check the wind. The wind. Now, the wind strength, I've left that at 100. I think we need to make that 0. Let's just try this, because we don't want the wind to do too much. We just want a little bit of turbulence. That's really all I'm looking for. So let's just run that. And now we can see the particles are moving much more slowly. And that's the kind of look that I was going for. Okay, let's just check the mass. Now the mass is at 50. Now it can be a lot lower than that. In fact, you can put it as low as 1. Leave it at the default. So let's do that and see what happens. Let's just move this out of the way. I don't think it's going to alter too much, but we'll just see if it makes any major difference. Well, no, they're all moving quite slowly, which is what I want. Let's try that at 50% and see what it does. Or mass 50, I should say, not 50%. Well, it doesn't make an awful lot of difference, does it? So, yeah, I mean, you can just sort of leave that as you sort of wish. I'll just leave it at 1. I think that's okay. Right, good. So we've got it that far, and everything is working as it should. So we can see that our particles are falling and they're moving in a way that we can say is pleasant on the eye. Now, the one thing we can do with the gravity, if you wish, you can move this up slightly. If you move it up slightly, you'll find that it will change. And now we're getting these higher particles moving more quickly. It depends what kind of a look you're going for, but this does allow you to art direct it. So if you put it back down here, you'll find that the lower particles will move and these higher particles won't, because there's a little bit of fall off in the gravity. So bear in mind that where you position it does make a difference to how the thing behaves. But anyway, I'm going to leave mine sort of about there, just above the bottom, sort of in that lower quarter, let's say, somewhere around there. We can do the same with the wind if we wish to, but we'll leave that where it is. But anyway, that's great. So the next part for us is to create some geometry to allow our particles to become visible. And that's where we're going to use volumes. We'll bring in a volume builder, so we'll click on there to bring one of those in. The volume type, we do want a sign distance field. The voxel size, though, we need to make 1. And then in our objects, we need to bring in our particles. So we need to come into Simulate, Thinking Particles, Settings, and where we've got all here, we can grab a hold of this and drag it in here. Okay, so that's what needs to be in our geometry there, or in our objects to create our geometry. So we've got that far. The next thing we need to do is work on what we're going to be doing with our particles here. So we just need to click the all. Now our radius, I'm going to make that 2. And in this velocity scale here, I'm going to set this to 0.3. And this will make our geometry stretch slightly as our particles fall, giving it quite a natural sort of look. We don't need to do anything else, so everything else is fine. We can just click the update if we need to, but we don't really need to bother with that. But anyway, that's set that up for us so far. The next thing to do is bring in a volume mesher. So we'll bring one of those in, drop the volume builder into there. And let's see where we are in here. We don't really need to do much. I will click Create Curvature Map and leave both as the curvature direction. I'll just do that. So let's just take this back to the beginning and just see what we get, see if we get any difference here. And now at the moment we clearly are. I can see the particles. We just need to zoom in a little bit so that we can see them more clearly. And there we go. We've got the particles are covering our can, and we can see that these here, they are stretching slightly as they speed up and move down the can. And that's the look I want. I mean, you can do this a lot more if you wish. You can make it more exaggerated than that. You can go into the builder here. You could set this velocity scale to 1 or even bigger than that if you wish to. But I think for the look I'm going for, I want something a little bit more subtle than that. So I'm going to keep it at 0.3. But it's entirely up to you. You're the art director, as I so often say. But anyway, let's just take this back to the beginning. And we've got our particles all set up and ready. We can just play this through. And there you go. We can see that it's working really nicely. So yeah, that's essentially how you go about putting droplets of water on a can. Now the only thing I will do, we could do with a few more. So let's go into our Expresso expression, select our P matter waves node, and in our shot value here, I'm just going to increase that to 2000 so that we've got double the number of particles. So let's just click forward, go back to 0, and now we can see we've got a lot more. And that'll give us, I think, a better result. So let's just run the sequence, see what happens. And there we go. They're all behaving really well. And yeah, that's looking really nice. And I think when we actually render that, we haven't got any textures obviously at the moment, but if we just render that, we can see that it's going to look quite nice. And when they're all, you know, you've got some textures there and you've got it set up so that you've got a transparent texture on these to make them look like water, it will all work very, very nicely. Okay, and that is how you go about putting droplets of water on a can. And that brings us basically to the end of this tutorial. So as always, I really hope you've enjoyed this one and that you've got a lot out of it, and that you can use some of these thinking particles within your own projects if you've not tried playing around with them before. You know, just bring a few nodes in with them, experiment, see what you can do. I mean, you can see how this stuff works, how they all relate to each other. You know, it does go a lot deeper than that, and I probably will do some more thinking particles work in the not too distant future because it's quite fascinating stuff. So, you know, perhaps we can look at some other rigs and some other setups for it and see what we can do. But anyway, for now, that just about brings us to the end of this tutorial. So if you have enjoyed the video, then please give it a like. And if you haven't already, then please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and of course, ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, then please do share this video because all this good stuff really does help keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that just about brings the curtain down on this one. So I'll see you very soon in the next tutorial.